So last time we left off from Perek Dalid, we saw they went to war on Israel and the Philistine. The Philistine win the war and they won. Day two, the Jewish people bring the Aron, assuming that it has some form of power, that it's going to save them. So they bring the Aron. Of course, Hashem refuses to allow himself to be dragged where the people want him to be, but rather they have to earn his presence, if we could say it that way. And therefore, even though he's Yosheva Kiruvim, we see he's still involved in a sense because 7.5 times more casualties occur on the second day of the war. And we see the death of Eli and the death of his sons, and his daughter-in-law also dies. And we could see the obsession as they die. We could see the obsession with the concept of the Aron as a religious object, that almost the Aron was God itself, and therefore they couldn't distinguish between the two. And in a sense, Perek Dalid was necessary for the Jewish people to understand that Aron is not God. But now in Perek Hey, Perek Vav, we're going to see the other side of the coin. And we'll see really these two Perakim, the Perek Hey is short, we'll see them together. And it's an education for the Jewish people, and it's going to be an education for the Philistine as well. And we'll see how, especially from these first two Pesukim of Perek Hey. Remind me at the end of Perek Vav to go back to talk about Shiloh, by the way, which we never had that discussion. They had the war. Where is Shiloh? What happens to Shiloh? We'll come back to that. So now we begin Perek Hey, Pasuk Aleph. Ufilishtim lakahu et Aron Elohim, vayivi'uhu me'even ha'ezer Ashdoda. The Philistine take the Aron from the battlefield to a city called Ashdod. Fine, very good. ויחו פילשתים את ארון האלוהים, ויביאו אותו בית דגון, ויציגו אותו אצל דגון. So now we have something else. Now this is interesting, right? Pasuk Bet sounds similar to Pasuk Aleph. They took the Aron, they take the Aron, but it tells us something else. It's not just they took the Aron from the battlefield, they brought it to the city. They now take the Aron and they place it in their house of Avodah Zarah. And they place it Itzel Dagon. Why? Why are they placing it in front of Dagon? As if to say, this is the spoils of our God. Our God, Dagon, captured the Aron. So you take the old God and you put it, the old God, whatever, the captured God, and you put it in front of the victorious God. That's what the Philistine were doing, right? We do this idea. It seems to be David Hamelech when he places the sword of Goliath with the Kohanim in the Mishkan. It seems to be a similar idea. You take the victory, you're attributing the victory to God, and therefore you place the symbol of the victory in the house of God. So therefore our God overcame the Jewish God. Keep in mind, and this is important for us to remember, these are people who believe in Avodah Zarah. And as we saw from Perek Daled, they're not opposed to the concept that the Aron has power. It could be Hashem, the Jewish God has power, but our God was stronger than their God. Okay, and that's what they do, and therefore they're placing him, the captured God, in front of the victorious God. By the way, as a side point, it's an interesting thing. What is this? Why is their God called the Philistine God called Dagon? So there are two options here. Option number one, it comes from the word Dagan, meaning grain, and they pray to the grain god because they need food, which could make a lot of sense. Second option, that Dagon from the word Dag, and this is what a lot of the Rishonim assume, Dagon from the word Dag, meaning fish, and since they're a seafaring nation, as we said, they come along the Greek coast, and they sail across the Mediterranean to Israel. So therefore, it could make sense that their God is a fish god. So you have a couple of options, unclear exactly what it is, but either way, the idea definitely being our God defeated the Jewish God.
Yeah, I
So
was reading somewhere, Rabbi, that there was like, some archaeologists, I guess, who are working around Syria, like in the mid 1800s, like they found pictures of like a merman, right? And I
mm,
think they initially attributed that to Dagon, but I think they've since sort of debunked that. So they think
oh
that it's definitely archaeologists. I think now definitely attribute it much more to grain or clouds,
yeah,
like Ugaritic or whatever, like other ancient Near Eastern
yeah, the
languages.
storm, the storm
That it's
gods,
more,
yeah,
yeah, it has
yeah,
much more to do with either produce or weather
or water, yeah.
than fish.
Than fish, which makes sense.
Yeah,
But okay,
yeah.
I should really ask my sister-in-law. She worked for 2 summers on a dig in Israel in a Philistine city. I forgot which one, but she actually lived.
Wow,
Yeah, I should probably ask her. She might have a better idea than me. But
that's awesome.
okay, right? But those are right. It makes sense, like the idea of food when you think about it in that sense, right?
Hmm.
That's how predominant the need for food was in their society. So therefore, the grain god definitely a possibility. But either way, for our purposes, is pasuk gimel. V'yashkimu ashdodim imachora. They wake up the next morning. They come into the temple. V'hinei dagon nofel lefanav artza lifnei Aron Adonai. V'yahut dagon v'yashivu otolim komo. So what's this idea? Dagon not just it fell down, it's nofel lefanav artza lifnei Aron Hashem. Almost as if what is the text trying to tell us? What does it look like? That God is
It's
bowing
prostrating on their
down, right?
back.
It's
Yeah.
prostrated, right? It's literally bowing down to Adon Hashem. Okay, so okay, I don't know. They're God. They take it and they stand up the idol in its proper place. Okay, yeah. Well, let's pretend it didn't happen, right? That's kind of what we get the sense of, and I'm pointing that out because we're going to see these Philistine. They're going to be a little bit stubborn, which might sound familiar to a different nation, which we'll talk about maybe. So now the next morning in Pasuk Dal, so now morning number 2. Exactly like before, prostrated, but this time, בראש דגון, ושתי כפות ידיו, כרותות אל המפתן, רק דגון נשאר עליו. So its head and its 2 hands have fallen off, only the shape of the dagon remains on the idol. Now, this idea of the head being beheaded and the hands being cut off is clearly a sense of victory, right? Almost like a scalping in a way in the Native American culture, but really throughout the Tanakh we see this idea. David, when he kills Goliath, he cuts off his head in order to claim victory. It's pretty interesting because normally we don't associate that. And we have Adoni Bezek in Sefer Shoftim, the king of Yerushalayim, who cuts off people's fingers, their thumbs and the thumbs of their feet as well, in order to, have that sense of victory. So not only is it that he fell down and he's prostrated, this time there's a sense of a complete submission to Hashem. No, okay. And by the way, as a side point, Pasuk Hey, so this is always ironic. Al ken lo yidechu kohanei Dagon v'chol habayim bet Dagon al miftan Dagon be'ashdod ad hayom hazeh. So it remains a holy place since Dagon fell on it and broke upon that spot. So therefore they won't walk on it because it's a holy place, which is kind of ironic because that's your solution. The Dagon fell down in front of the Aron, so therefore the Dagon made the spot where it fell sacred. I mean, is it the solution kind of the opposite message? Okay, fine. The Philistine are not really getting it. So what do?
Rabbi, maybe it's not sacred. Maybe they were afraid. If the gun fell on the Miftan, they could not do it. Maybe they're afraid.
Oh, okay, fine. Oh, okay, that could be okay. Normally I'm thinking of like hallowed ground and sacred. Okay, that's good point. Okay, could be. Maybe it's a scary place, right? They're scared. Okay, fine, good point. So now we have Pasuk Vav. It seems to be.
There's also something I was reading somewhere. Oh, sorry, Rabbi. I was also reading somewhere that there's like a reference to this, like in another Tzefanya.
Yes,
something about like
Correct.
People who like leap over the threshold, or
Correct.
like
Correct.
they reference it, like it was.
Rashi,
So I guess it was,
Rashi references that pasuk from Sefania. Correct. Rashi references that pasuk here.
so I
It
guess it
seems
must
to
have been like a
be
long-standing custom
yeah.
then, I guess.
No,
whatever.
no. So it's not that she suggests that they learned it from here. That you don't walk over the holy ground. Right, right. It's actually interesting. Not that it's a long-standing custom, that they learned it from here, that this is the origination of the custom. Therefore, we have like
Right.
that halkin,
Yeah,
right?
but if it's still going on in Sifanyan's time, that means I guess that they were doing it for a long time.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, of course, right.
Yeah.
Once they started doing it, and then it lasted. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting, right? Okay, boy.
Yeah.
So now we have pasuk vav. So that's the God and the God versus the God. We'll put it right. Hashem versus Dagon. The gods battling in the eyes of the Philistine. But then there's something else that's happening. ויכבד יד אדוני אל אשדודים, וישימם, ויך אותם בתחורים, את אשדוד ואת גבוליה. They start having some plague, ותכבד יד Hashem. God yach otam. Like a plague comes to Ashdod, God places his hand upon them, and they have some form of some digestion plague, it seems to be, of some sort. It's not exactly clear exactly what it is. Somehow, the assumption is it's associated with achbarim, with mice, or maybe perhaps rats or of some sort. Exactly what the connection is, I don't know exactly, but somehow between the mice and the intestines, the Philistine are in trouble. So they have this plague going on in the city. So the Philistine now think, they pause and they say,
Rabbi, excuse me, Rabbi, what's the purpose of the Krauchtiv that we have here multiple times with this, but with these, whatever it is, the diseases or whatever it is?
So keep in mind, you also have it in the Kilalot as well within the Torah. I don't know. Apparently, afulim was a stronger word, was not a appropriate word to be read in public. Tahurim is a more delicate word. But again, we lost the sensitivity to it. But that's the suggestion. The suggestion is afulim is not a word you wanted to say in public. It was a little bit too gross, perhaps too vulgar, and therefore use the word tahurim instead. If it's dealing with words associated with the bathroom, it shouldn't be a complete surprise, right? That a lot of our curse words today happen to originate within the bathroom. So it seems to be going back to ancient times, right? I mean, you can almost imagine, right? Almost of why, what the connotation of afolim might have been. And tahurim might have been more like, I don't know, some form of excrement or something that was a little bit less shocking. So therefore, it's more publicly suitable to be read. Okay.
Weird that we're censoring an Navi.
No, but we do it in the Torah as well. Keep in mind. In the Torah as well, you have the same switch. So forget about the Navi, even more so, right? So it's like...
it's in Kitavo, no?
Yeah, in Kitavo, yeah, in the Kilalot. So like it's really...
It's the same exact thing, yeah.
No, same exact two words coming into play. Yeah. So, right? Interesting, right? But what's unfortunate, we just have no idea what the context of afulim is 2,000 years later, right? But we could imagine it's some form of unpleasant bathroom word. That's what it seems to be. Okay, fine. So they get a plague as well, the gods and the people, right? That the dual thing. Since you set it up, almost since they asked for it, that the Dagon should suffer because they put that on in Dagon's house. So therefore, not only did they get punished, also Dagon. Okay. So pasuk zayin. Vayiru anshe Ashdod kichen. Oh, really? This is what's happening. Amru lo yashev Aron Elohei Yisrael imanu. Let's get this Aron out of here. We don't want this Aron, the Aron of the God of Israel. No, by the way, that's how I'm going to refer to it throughout the Perek. The Aron of the God of Israel, because they realize the God behind the Aron. His hand is too powerful for us. He's overcoming us. Now, it always fascinates me. So how do they explain what happened in the war? if they're suffering now, so they're saying that God is too powerful, how do they explain what happens in the war? It seems to be their answer is he's strong in Ashdod. Right, that's the answer, right? This idea certain gods have ability in certain areas. So Ashdod, he seems to be a little bit powerful. It's on the sea. So they come up with a solution. And Pasuk Hay, וישלחו ויעשו את כל שרי פלשתים עליהם ויאמרו נעשה לארון אלוהי ישראל. What am I going to do with it? ויאמרו גת יסוב ארון אלוהי ישראל ויסבו את ארון אלוהי ישראל. Okay, move it to Gat. Why Gat? I don't know. Maybe it was more holy. Maybe it was away from the sea. It's not on the shore. I don't know exactly what they were thinking. Maybe there's no house of Dagon, or there isn't. I have no idea, right? But maybe it was a more religious city. It was a more important city. It was a more prosperous city. Whatever they said, okay, God, Aron Elohei Israel, and God could defeat us in Ashdod. He won't defeat us in Gat. It is interesting to know that they don't try to put the Aron back in that temple of Dagon. We're not going to try that. So instead we have, and I'll read this very quickly, so they move it to Gat. So here it seems to be a little bit of a bigger plague because this time it's Anshe Ha'ir Mikaton Ba'ad Gadol. Okay, they also have this type of plague, but again, a similar plague having to do with the intestines. So they say, okay, this is not going to work. And they don't want to give it up, right? They want to maintain control. So they send it to Ekron, the third city. And no chance. And they're bringing it here for us to die. What are they doing? שלחו את ארון אלוהי ישראל וישוב למקומו ולא ימית אותי ואת עמי כי הייתה מהומת מוות בכל העיר כבדה מאוד יד האלוהים שם. We don't want to die anymore. Send it back, return it. We don't want to die. And it even says in Pasuk Bet, ואנשים אשר לא מתו, the people didn't die, הוכו בתחורים, they had the disease, ותעל שבעת העיר השמיים. And the screams are reaching the heavens. So it seems to be, it came to Akron, people started dying. They said, we don't want it here. They were already scared. They said, let's return it. And this seemed to be the popular support opinion, the popular, the opinion of public, the popular opinion. Return it back to Israel. We don't want this to do with it. We don't want anything to do with it. And this time seems to be the plagues are worsening each time. This time people are also dying. That's our Perek Hey. So let's look. Really, the story continues in Perek Vav. So we're going to go through Perek Vav as well, and then we'll analyze, and then we'll try to put it in a bigger picture. We'll pause in the middle of Perek Vav, analyze, and then we'll complete Perek Vav. So what do they do? Right? This is not what you would expect, and that's why I think it's interesting. Pasuk Aleph of Perek Vav. Vahi Aron Adonai b'stei Filishtim sheva chodashim. They didn't return to Aron. They just left it in the field for 7 months. Why didn't they return it? It seems to be that they had a difference of opinion. No, maybe it's not really. Maybe it's by chance. Are we for sure? Is it really stronger than Dagon? We won the war, so that has to mean something. And I'm sure they're kind of very religiously confused because they won the war. Well, how are they going to explain what happened? The sequence of events is very strange. If they won the war, their God is more powerful, but then they're suffering. Their God is getting broken. So there's something happening. How do we explain it? And kind of they're stuck Shiv'ah Hodashim in the fields of the Philistine. Look what happens in Pasuk Bet. ויקראו פלישתים לכהנים ולכוסמים לאמור, מה נעשה לארון אדוני, הודיעונו במה נשלחנו למקומו. Seemingly, they're asking these kohanim They're called the Kohanim and the Kosmi. These are new people we haven't met before. This is the Pilishtim religious class. And seemingly what they're really asking them, what should we do? How should we send it back? What do you mean, how should we send it back? So it's very interesting. They give a whole response, starting from Pasuk Gimel all the way to Pasuk Tet is the response of these people of how to return the Aron. Okay, so you have 7 Pisukim. So let's take a look at these 7 Pisukim. At first, you're going to think they're saying one thing. Then we're going to realize maybe they're really saying something else. And we'll try to put it all in perspective of what's happening. Don't send the Aron back empty-handed if you return it. Pay a guilt offering. As terafeu, maybe then we'll be healed. Right? Maybe then we'll be able to figure out how to get rid of this plague if we return it in the proper way. So they ask, what should we return? What's the guilt offering? Take for the 5 princes, the 5 governors of the Pilishtim, take 5 tehorim, right? You could imagine golden tehorim, 5 golden achbarim, 5 mice, and put it on the side of the Aron, and that's a guilt offering to commemorate the miracle, which makes sense in a certain way. I mean, not that I think the 5 tehorim of Zahav were pretty, aesthetically pleasing, but that was the plague, okay. And that's where we get the sense that it had something to do with mice and some form of disease, the intestines and the mice from this combination of what they're sending back. That's what it seems to be somehow that came into play together. Okay. So
the commentary I'm reading.
What?
The commentary I'm reading says that the mice are propagators of the bubonic plague.
Yeah, it could be. So it could be. That's what I'm saying. Probably connected in some way. They saw the mice. They knew they were getting the plague, and they're trying to figure out if it's from Hashem, if it's not from Hashem, right? But it seems to be, and the plague somehow resulted in this form of hemorrhoids or whatever it may have been. Okay. Pasuke. Va'asitim salmei tehorechem salmei bachanechem mashchitim et haaretz. That's the glory you're going to give. You're going to acknowledge that the God of Israel is not too shabby. You're going to give him some form of acknowledgement. Maybe then he'll lessen your hand against you. So this is fascinating. What's the implication here? That even though the Aron is in the Sadeh for 7 Hodashim, for 7 months, the plague is still continuing in some way. They're still suffering, maybe in a lessened fashion. Maybe they're not dying because they had 7 months to figure it out. They're not taking immediate action, but they seem to be more like the plague is definitely still there in some form or fashion. And maybe if we return it properly, maybe we'll be able to get it. And here is the key pasuk, I think, that kind of sheds light, gives us a little bit of explanation on what's going on. Why are you going to make your hearts heavy? Don't do what the Egyptians did. They waited too long, and they suffered all these plagues that they suffered because they had a heavy heart that refused to acknowledge Hashem. So what's happening here? The Pilishtim are viewing themselves as if they're getting a plague. And indeed, there's actually a lot of textual connections between these makot that the Pilishtim are suffering and the 10 makot of Egypt. So for instance, one of the connections that you have is the idea of al tishalihu oto rekam, that they say in Pasuk Gimel, don't return empty-handed. Rather, you're going to return it with gold. It's the same way the Jewish people, right? they did, right? They didn't return to the Kam. And they got gold and silver when they left Egypt. And therefore, they emptied out Egypt from the gold and silver. So too, in a similar way, the return to God. Also, this idea of hardening the heart. Also, the idea of Magefa, the idea of the hand of Hashem against them, the idea of the hand of Hashem against their gods as well, and the word Hitalel, right? Getting the sense that God is trying to, what's the idea of the Makot? God proving himself. So God is also proving himself in the story here, meaning, in different words, God, now he lost a lot of credibility. From what we saw in Perek Daled, the Philistine, when the Aron was brought to the war, the Philistine were scared. The Philistine was scared. Now, all of a sudden, we realize that the Philistine are thinking otherwise. Maybe they're not so scared. Is it Hashem? Is it not Hashem? They're not really sure. They're struggling with it. There's having this eternal debate. Some people are saying put it here. The other people are saying we don't want it. Some people are saying return it. The other people are saying no, not yet. Maybe it's not Hashem. So what are the Philistines? Don't harden your hearts. Don't be like Paro, denying Hashem. Acknowledge that this is really possible, that something big is happening. It's okay. Acknowledge it. And God is proving himself once again, despite the fact that in Perek Daled, they were able to defeat God's people and capture the Aron. And now they're finding out that maybe it's a little bit more complicated than that.
All right, this is several hundred years later.
This is, yeah, of course, several hundred years from Yetziat Mitzrayim, yeah, of course.
Yeah, from Yetziat Mitzrayim, and yet the Philistine are making a decision, a national decision, based on what happened in Egypt 300 years earlier, 400 years earlier.
So you always have to wonder, like we said in Perek Daled, are the Philistine really saying these words, or is the Jewish author kind of putting these ideas into their heads for the sake of the people who are reading the Tanakh, right? Keep in mind, we don't know exactly that they said this exactly. Definitely, they weren't using textual references to the story. That much we could say, right? But the fact that when he's saying, don't harden your hearts like Paro hardened his heart, did the Philistine really say that? Maybe they just said, don't be stubborn, acknowledge that it's God. And the author is putting it in their words that he's connecting it to Egypt because he wants to explain to the reader of Tanakh exactly what's happening now, right? Always keep that in mind. We don't know to what level the author is taking a little bit of liberties, right? So, I mean, definitely we know, keep in mind, most of these conversations are clearly translated from a different language. That definitely, the Philistine are not speaking Hebrew. So keep that in mind. Okay. So
meaning what? Like it's one thing when a Navi or an author or a prophet is speaking about the Jewish people's intentions or what they were thinking, but here we're talking about a completely different people. So he's got to write something for the Jewish audience who are readers of Tanakh, right?
Right, exactly. By the way, it could have even been that they made some weird reference to some Philistine history that we don't know about, right?
Yeah,
so of course, right. Keep that in mind, right? I think in these types of scenarios, it's fairly obvious. Like my favorite one always is that Bat Paro never called Moshe because of Ki Min Hamayim Mishitihu. That's a Hebrew translation of the word Moshe. Playing off Mishitihu in Hebrew means drew out of the water, but she didn't speak Hebrew, so she called him Moshe for a different reason. And the Torah is giving you the Hebrew version of it. I mean, right? That's really, you can't argue with that one in that sense, I think. So you always keep in mind, we always have to be, we'll call it suspicious, when the Torah is quoting other nations as saying something, because definitely at the bottom, at the very least, it's probably translated. And it could be, obviously, we're taking liberties, poetic license of putting words in their mouth that they may have not said because of their lack of knowledge of Jewish history. Okay, but they should have said, right? That's what the author is trying to claim. They should have said this. Okay. So very good. We see them, and we get this sense we're in like this testing period of God. They're testing God. Because again, like you said, they did win the war. They're not really sure. Is this really from God? Is it not? And God is trying to prove himself, just like during Yetziat Mitzrayim, to prove that he is the God. And don't make any deductions just because you saw that I got captured, or my Aron got captured, perhaps better put it. Okay. So they say like this in Pasuk Zayin Hit. We'll read this, and then we can understand the whole idea. Take a new wagon. Two nursing cows, so they're nursing babies, that they never were used to having a plow or some form of yoke upon them. And tie them to the wagon. Put their children who they're nursing behind them. And descend the wagon with these two cows who have never pulled anything before. They're not experienced with a yoke, with a wagon that has never traveled before, so it might break or something like of the sort, and don't have somebody driving the wagon. They send it and let it go, and their children are going to be behind them in Philistine territory. See if it's going to go towards the Jewish city of Bet Shemesh, which is not the regular way the cows would go. It's not the regular path, and they have to go up on an incline in order to reach it. And then if that happens, then we know all the evil that has befallen us has come from Hashem. But if not, they don't go to Bet Shemesh. Well, no, it's just to be clear. This happened. We had a bad plague for a couple of months, and that was that. So meaning, the Philistines are pulling a Paro. Is it really Hashem or not? But they want upping Paro. They're a little bit smarter. They're creating a scientific experiment to determine is Hashem really in charge or not. So they have their scientific experiment. The odds are stacked against the Aron actually being led by these two cows who have never pulled anything while they're nursing their children who are behind them in the opposite direction, and they have to go up the cliff. Fine. Go up the path, I don't know, up a cliff, up a mountain, I guess, better put. They have to go in order to show that they're really returning to Hashem. Okay, so at least this is one about a scientific experiment. In Egypt, what was their scientific experiment? There they called the Hartumim. The Hartumim said, they did it, so Paro decided it wasn't them, so that didn't work out too well for Paro. The Egyptians, the Palestinians, the Philistines here are getting ahead of the game. I called the Palestinians, I should not have said that. These Philistines have nothing to do with the modern-day Palestinians. We'll talk about that another time. Okay, right. So that's our story. So that's what they're going to do. Which shows you, when do we acknowledge that it's God? When is it a natural thing? It's very hard to know. And here these people living in this religious world, they're all confused. They want the war. Is it really Hashem? Is it not? Okay, so they make this test beautiful. They put them on the wagon. They put their children in the house behind them. And what happens?
Rabbi, they need the test, not just to see if God did it to them. They need the test to know how to deal then with the Jewish people later. Are they strong? Are they under the protection of God? Or they're not under the protection of God? Do they have really their own God? Maybe they're godless. Maybe, like the Egyptians thought first. In Egypt, there's only one God, Paro. In Eretz Plishtim, there's one God, is Dagon. Maybe he rules over the Jewish people too. So this is a question on how you treat from now on the Israeli nation.
So I hear you.
So the test was important because that is the strength of the people.
So I hear you, but keep in mind two things. Keep in mind, at the end of the day, they still won the war. So
The what?
meaning they still defeated Am Yisrael. So even if the Aron returns and they couldn't capture the Aron, they were still able to capture Am Yisrael. So there's this almost, if you want to call it, this cognitive dissonance. So they might be confused.
No,
But
they might have thought maybe the Israeli people did something wrong in the eyes of their own God. Maybe he
right,
punished them,
right,
not the Plishtim.
right. So we don't have that resolution to the story. So that's the second point. We don't have that resolution to the story. What did the Philistine conclude about this episode? We don't know. What and I think we're doing that on purpose. We don't really, the author of the Navi, keep in mind, you're right, maybe that's what the Philistine are thinking. Makes a lot of sense. But the author of the Navi really probably couldn't care less what they're thinking. We're gonna see his conclusion to the story. It's something completely unexpected. And that's where I think we need to put our focus. So it's not so much for the Philistine, what are they thinking, but I think also the Philistine are mirroring Am Yisrael. And I think that really gets us to the point we're trying to make in Perek Hey and Perek Vav. You don't think Am Yisrael are wondering the same thing about these Philistine, about Hashem that the Philistine are? Of course they are. They came, they take the Aron, they bring it to war, they say, okay, now we're going to win, and then they lose and the Aron gets taken captive. These are people who worship the Aron for all intents and purposes. They don't know how to process. Eli dies, his sons die. They don't know what to do with this. They're thinking just like the Philistine. Maybe they're going stronger. Who knows what they're thinking? And what happens? This story that God is proving himself, he's proving himself not for the Philistine, but he's proving himself for Am Yisrael. No, this is a message to Am Yisrael. I'm still all powerful. The Agon is not more powerful than me. The Philistine cannot contain me. I'm more powerful than them. The reason why you lost the war has nothing to do with my ability. It has to do with our relationship, which you weren't focused on whatsoever. Beautiful. Okay, now we're talking. But I think the key to the Perek lies in the fact that the Philistine doubts is really a way for us as readers to understand the doubts of Am Yisrael as well. And that with the resolution, we're going to talk about the resolution on the Jewish side. We don't care what conclusion the Philistine make. And it seems to be, by the way, completely unimportant because later on you're going to have Goliath coming and challenging Am Yisrael and cursing Ma'archot Elohim Hayim, the Navi says. So it seems to be the Philistine did not take some form of religious lesson from the story, which is okay. It's not for them. The story is for Am Yisrael. So what happens? So it returns. Right? Go straight. They're going and they're crying, by the way. They're crying, they're mooing, because they said they're leaving the children, but they're going anyway. They don't deviate from the path. And the Philistine, they're actually watching what's happening. Right? We'll see in Pasuk Tet Zayin, they're going to go return once they realize it's from Hashem. God passed the test. Okay. And almost the Navi sets us up great. Okay, so you have the Philistine watching. It's going to the town of Bet Shemesh. Bring the Aron. And what happens? The Shavuot time, Pesach time. They're harvesting the wheat in the valley. So all the people are out of the fields. See, the Aron came. They're very excited. He comes to this guy's field. There was a big rock. So what do? Beautiful. They cut up the wood of the wagon. They used the wood as firewood. They take the cows that brought the Aron and they offer it as a sacrifice. Wonderful. And then all of a sudden, who comes into play? Halviim. I don't know how, I guess they will live in Bet Shemesh, what? But Halviim horidu et Aron Adonai v'tagaz asher ito asher buchli zahav v'simul even gedolah. So they put it on that big rock that's right next to the Mizbeach, the fabricated Mizbeach. They put the Aron on this big rock, and very nice. And they're celebrating, they're having a holiday for Hashem and Beit Shemesh, very exciting. And here the story should stop. Okay, they're celebrating, the Pilishtim go, they return, and the story should stop. Am Yisrael learned their lesson. The Aron is not God. They have to have a relationship with God. You can't force God to respond just because you bring him into war. He was there. He caused you to die 7.5 times more casualties than on the first day. Fine, but you can't force him to do what you want. But okay, learn the lesson. God is not the Aron. God defended his honor in the Pilishtim to prove to Am Yisrael that he's still the true God. Okay, very good, wonderful. Story should end. But the story doesn't end. And it's so brief, this ending of the story. We have a conclusion to the story. It's so brief, and it makes us want to scratch our head what exactly happened. So, well, let's read Pasuk Yud Zayin and Yud a little bit. We'll read it quickly. ועד כופר הפרזי ועד אבל הגדולה אשר הניחה עליה את ארון אדוני עד היום הזה בסדר יהושע בן שמשי. Okay, give us like a concluding pesukim seemingly, right? We're talking about here's the five mice. Here's a matching video. The 5 mice for the Pilishtim. We have 5 mice for each one of the 5 cities. We get a list of the cities, very good. And then we have extra golden mice for all the cities of Pilishtim, and it remains there. Beautiful. Oh, okay, wonderful. Then all of a sudden, there's like an addendum. It's like somebody forgot to write something. Probably because A, we want the Pilishtim to be out of the picture by the time we write it. But B, it's to tell us the way it's set up, the lesson is not fully learned. All of a sudden, Vayach be'anshe Shemesh, Hira'u ba'aron Adonai. ויח בעם 70 איש, 50,000 איש, ויתאבלו העם, כי היכה אדוני בעם, מכה גדולה. All of a sudden, the people of Beit Shemesh, seemingly from the Pashat of the text, they start dying. And how many people die? First 70, then 50,000 people. 70 ish, 50,000 ish, right? 50,000 70 people, according to the Peshat. The rabbis in the Midrash are bothered why 70 ish, 50,000 ish. So they say either 70 people who are like equivalent to 50,000 or 50,000, who each one was equivalent to one of the 70 of the Sanhedrin. Either way, right? They're trying to say one of them is defining the other. They're not sure which one is the actual quantity and which one is the qualitative statement. Fine, that's the approach of the Midrash, or the Peshat will just add a missing vav. But either way, why did they die? It says the Navi, Hira'u ba'aron Hashem. We'll see. We'll come back to this idea. So what's the lesson to be learned? Seemingly, Pasuk Kaf. ויאמרו השבט שמש מי יוכל לעמוד לפני אדוני האלוהים הקדוש הזה, ומי יעלה מעלינו? We can't. How are we going to live with this? What are we going to do? וישלחו מלאכים ליושבי קריית יערים לאמור, השיבו פלישתים את ארון אדוני, ידעו העלו אותו עליכם. Who do they sound like at the end of the story? Who do they sound like exactly? The Pilishtim, right? The Pilishtim, right? We're gonna have that.
They sound exactly like them.
Right? Yeah. Send it to the other city, and that's how a story ends. And Pasuk Perek Zayin, completely different thing, right? They come, they bring up the Aron, and they place it, and they keep it there. The first 2 Pesukim of Perek Zayin. So what happened? Hey, why are they dying? And what's the point of the story? Why are we making it sound like the Pilishtim? So the Pshat, Hira'u ba'aron Hashem, is they saw the Aron of Hashem, is reminiscent of a pasuk we have at the end of Sefer B'Midbar, at the end of Parashat B'Midbar, not Sefer B'Midbar, in which it says, "V'lo yavo lirot kevala et hakodesh v'metu." That the beginning of Perek Dalet, that the Leviim are not allowed to come. The Kohanim are not allowed to. The Leviim can't come. That they can't come see the Aron before the Kohanim cover the Aron for them. Here's our pasuk. They can't come before the Kohanim fully cover the holy utensils, the Aron, otherwise they'll die. But what are they going to do? They can't even see it. Meaning, there's a sense, and this is the Leviim, there's a sense of Kedusha that you have to have that's associated even with the even with eyesight, that you have to see the Aron out of kavod. And what does Nadak suggest? Maybe they even open the Aron and they're looking at the luchot inside. Either way, there's a lack of kavod. Why is there a lack of kavod? It seems to be obvious what is the lack of kavod, because this is the lesson that they're going to learn. God is not in the Aron. The Aron is not a holy talisman. We learned the lesson, okay. So therefore, it's a nice representative of God. So they start rejoicing without the proper respect. And what happens? They die. And how does this Perek end? Oh, you let your respect now, we can continue with the Perek. Meaning Judaism has a fascinating balance here. And this is how Judaism conveys a complex idea. We have 3 Perekim talking about the Aron. The first Perek, the Aron can get captured. It's not the end-all be-all. Am Yisrael can function without the Aron, and Hashem can allow himself to get captured. Perek, Hashem has his kavod. Hashem has to defend his honor. Even though Hashem is not the Aron, everybody thinks Hashem is the Aron, and therefore he has to play up and defend his honor. At the end of Perek Shishi, we can come, Am Yisrael learned the hard lesson, okay, God is not the Aron. He's separate. But at the same time, since it's a representative of his Kiddusha, it's an object that's declared holy by him, it deserves proper kavod. So we have to find this proper balance. We can't disregard it completely. We can't attribute it kavod to the point where we think it's divine. We have to find this middle ground. This is what the story is about. Am Yisrael struggling in their relationship to the holy objects that exist. This is what these Perakim are all about. And why we have these Perakim? Because it's something that we all go through. It's a complicated issue. How do we relate the concept of Kiddusha? We talk about it's not Hashem, but yet at the same time, we should stand up when the Sefer Torah is being carried out because of the kavod of the Torah. But so we have this idea of the object has sanctity, but yet at the same time, making sure we separate it from God and realizing that the object is not the end-all be-all. Our relationship extends in non-physical ways beyond Hashem. And if you want to say in short, Judaism is a complicated religion, yeah, this is a great teaching moment how complicated Judaism is, that we have to find that nuance, we have to find that balance between 2 extremes of an issue. And here's really one of the great stories to really drive that idea home. So that's it for Perek Dalid Hey Vav, and then we'll return to the idea of Shemuel Hanavi in our future